Learning Center. EONS. EON.
Action. Welcome everybody to my second lecture about IELTS. In the past episode, I gave a small presentation about how the IELTS exam is conducted, and I explained a few things that happen. Some things maybe it's useful to know before you tackle the exam. It's not an easy one. So that's why I'm here to give you some tips. And in this presentation here, I'm going to be talking about the first two parts of the IELTS exam. As you can see here on the screen, there's going to be part 1 and part 2. Both are challenging because some students think, well, this is difficult, this is a little bit intimidating. People feel shy. And if you don't know what is going to happen, it may be a bit daunting. As an experience, it could be fine, but you need to prepare a little bit for it. And if you prepare, it could be a fantastic experience. You could have a great conversation with a nice examiner. Usually examiners are nice. So in this first part here, we're going to be talking about speaking part 1. Before we continue, I should like to say, if you have any questions, please write them down in the chat line. My colleague will refer to me as soon as they can. I'm informed that my voice is probably not coming through all right. So a little moment for stabilization of audio devices. Audio devices being stabilized. Everything seems cool. My man over there is busy and he's good. Let me tell you this, but you're not going to take him away from here. So anyway, we're talking about IELTS speaking part 1. So how to boost your performance, how to make it good. And yeah, let's have a look at the first one. If you have any questions, please write them in the chat line, or, and I'm serious here, feel free to just speak up, unmute yourselves and speak up. I mean, I'm accustomed to talking to my students in class, so it's perfectly fine to hear questions. In fact, I would be very happy to hear that somebody's on the other end of the screen here because I see nobody. But anyway, let's proceed and let's talk about IELTS speaking part 1. So how to boost your performance? Here's the first tip that I would like to give you. That is a tip that stems from experience. The experience that I have is with other students, not Indonesian students, but still Far Eastern Asian students. And sometimes, as I said, out of shyness, some students just give the very basic answer, the very basic yes, no answer, or just answer with one word. Let me give you an example here. Let's look at it on the screen. This is an example of what you should not do. So again, imagine the question is something like, are you still friends with any of your childhood friends? This is a part 1 official question from 2020 booklet. So I used to ask this question. Are you still friends with any of your childhood friends? Some students will just go ahead and answer, yes. What can I do as an examiner? I have to accept the answer. It's an answer. It's coherent. It's fine. It doesn't really say much about your speaking abilities. It does tell me that you understand the language, maybe, but it would be impossible to ascertain what. Just give me a second here because I'm actually having a single problem with sharing the screen, in actual fact. I need some technical assistance here, Mas. So yeah, you're spared from looking at me, which is probably so. Develop your answers a little. Again, what you should not do is just give monosyllabic answers like yes, no, or another question. Here, what do you value most about your friends? And you answer honesty or love or affection, whatever. I don't know. It's very short. It doesn't give me the chance to actually figure out how well you can speak. As an examiner, I will just proceed and probably ask you why, which is the classical question that an examiner might ask. If they're run out of questions and the time is still ticking, there's still at least a minute, I'll ask you why. And I'll talk more about this in the future. Anyway, what you should do is develop your answer a little bit. Just talk to me. And I give you here an example. You can see it on the screen. Example, it will be like, oh yeah, quite a few actually. I have been close with some of my high school friends for many years. We always keep in touch. For example, if there is a birthday celebration, whatever kind. So this is good. I mean, you're talking to me. You're not talking for too long, but you're saying something and you're bringing up words in English. So resist the temptation of answering in monosyllables, even if you have no idea what to talk about. And I will be talking about this more in a second, because the chance may happen when you seriously have no idea what to say. You're just like, yeah, well, yeah, I'm in touch with my childhood friends. What else do you want to know? So we'll be talking about this very shortly, but let me proceed on. It's just like uh, the same goes the opposite way. Yes, I'm telling you, do speak. Yes, do talk and do not give short answers. But at the same time, do not linger for too long on the question. I mean, the opposite example exists. Some students have already taken some examinees. I mean, have already taken the IELTS exam. They know the structure and they feel like they can, the longer they talk, the better. In part one, this is not the case. So yes, you should be talking, but I'll give you a time limit. In fact, I'll give you a number, no more than 20 seconds. So do not take the questions as prompts for starting a conversation. That will happen in part three. And in part three, yes, by all means, we'll be talking about part three in the next video. But in part three, absolutely, you can talk on as long as you want. In fact, the more, the better. But in part one, no, please. Because at some point, you're going to make the examiner a little bit uncomfortable because it is not exactly acceptable of the examiner to interrupt you in part one, but they will show some kind of impatience if you just go on talking for forever, because they have a time limit too, and they have to ask a specific number of questions. So ideally, you will take 20 seconds to answer each question. Calculating that there is an approximate 3-4 questions per frame, the examiner will ask you 3 frames, 3 times 3 times 3, you will get to an approximate 3 minutes. And then there's the examiner's questions, we'll bring it up to 4, and that is exactly the limit, 4 to 5 minutes. Of course, there's going to be time for some why and why not questions on the part of the examiner, and this is perfectly fine. But keep your questions within a 20-second limit. So this comes with experience, comes with a little bit of time, but you more or less, the example that I provided you with before stands. So just the 3-line answer would just do fine. Not too short, not too long. This is part one. It's going to be a barrage of questions. you'll get approximately 12 questions, some of which may be interesting, some of which may be boring. You've got to answer them all and satisfactorily. There are some other things that must be said, however, about the answers. So, point here, what kind of answers? Sometimes there are questions that may be a bit boring. Honestly, if you want to know the truth, as an examiner myself, I used to feel bored sometimes. The questions were just lame. Lame means that they're not going anywhere. It's just not interesting. It's questions that I would never ask anybody. So have mercy on the examiners. Just figure that they too are working. They're not examining you as a person. They're examining your language by means of the tools that they have been provided. And they have not even chosen the question according to what you look like, how you appear to be that morning. They have not done any such thing because the questions are chosen before you get into the room. So yeah, the questions are what they are. Just do your best with what you have. If, and this may happen, I mean, some candidates have had this with me and they could not understand the word. I'll give you a practical example. I'll give you a practical example in a second of a word that a candidate could not understand with me. It was a different nationality, and I'm sure that in this country, this word would be perfectly understood just because there is a similar word in your language. But in this case here, my candidate just didn't know what it was, what it meant, and it was a question of part one. Now, there are two strategies here, strategies, a big name for one of them. Let's say there are two approaches. Approach number one is wrong, and approach number one means that you just pretend like you have understood. You think, yeah, well, it must mean this. Oh, yeah, it must mean that. Okay. But in fact, you may be totally wrong. So the correct thing to do in this case is ask. Ask exactly what the word means. Ask the examiner a direct question. The direct question should not be anything like, I don't understand. Because in this case, the examiner will be forced to just be silent. There's nothing you can do. We cannot help the candidates. If the candidate asks the question, we are supposed to give some kind of answer. But if the candidate does not ask anything and simply says, well, I don't understand, that's a problem because by rules, we are not allowed to do anything but remain silent and in case move on to the next question. So if a word is unclear and you're not 100% sure what it means, ask the examiner, can you please explain the meaning of this? So here's the word that I remember from my experience, at least. It was, when do you really need to concentrate? This is a classical example. Concentrate is a word that probably most Indonesian students can understand, but some of my other students would not know exactly what this means. So they remain silent and they say, I don't understand. In which case, what could I do? Nothing. But another candidate on another occasion actually asked me, what does the word concentrate mean? And I could answer. I could just say, well, focus. Here's the word. just. So here's the point. You should never say, I don't understand. What is it? Just ask a specific question. What does concentrate mean? Or you can also say alternatively, can you please repeat the question? And that is also perfectly acceptable. So the examiner will absolutely repeat the question for you at a slower pace. So when do you really need to concentrate? At which point you will understand which one is the word that you don't know. Sometimes you don't know a word, so you cannot take the word out of the sentence, isolate it, and repeat it because you don't know when it starts, you don't know when it ends. I'm not saying always, I'm saying this could be a case. So you can ask, repeat the question, please. Could you please repeat the question? Could you please repeat whatever? The examiner will repeat slowly, and then you can ask a further question. What do you mean by concentrate? The examiner will give you a synonym for that word, a similar word, something that means more or less the same. In my case, I used focus. And for some reason, many candidates didn't know the word concentrate. All candidates knew the word focus. So I would just say concentrate, focus, and they were happy and they could actually answer the question. So this is important. Do not pretend like you understand, because you could give an answer that will just lower your marks on coherence. Coherence means I'm talking about apples and you answer about apples. You do not answer about football. So you keep on topic. You stay on track with me. So this is a good tip that many students sometimes are kind of, let's say, a little bit shy to ask. Like they think they must have this kind of ready answer at all times. This stems at the same time, if I may say that, this stems also from an understanding of the IELTS examination that is informed by your experience in school. So in school, what do? Everybody, each and every one of us has been to school, and some of you are probably still in school. So what do we do in school? There's a teacher. There's a teacher who's asking a question, sometimes a direct question. And we have to provide them with an answer. Not only that, it has to be a correct answer. Now, depending on the culture, some teachers will accept a question like, I don't understand what you mean. But in other cultures, it's not really customary to ask a teacher, you gotta provide an answer. And so many students can feel this atmosphere during an IELTS exam. And the atmosphere is like, okay, this guy is an authority. So he's asking a question. I must answer without any hesitation, without any doubts. I cannot ask him for any elucidation, clarification, and more importantly, most importantly, you gotta tell him the truth. Think about this. Now, I'll give you a hypothetical situation in IELTS, okay? The question is, it doesn't exist, this question in IELTS, but I'll give you this example here. And the examiner tells you, asks you, what is the capital of Malaysia? There's two possibilities at this point. Possibility number one, open quote. Capital Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, think, close quotes. Possibility number two. Oh, well, the capital of Malaysia, as far as I can recall, is Beijing. It's a pretty big city. It's really nice. I've been there twice. Close quotes. The first answer is correct. The capital of Malaysia is Kuala Lumpur. The second is totally incorrect, as everyone knows. So which one do you think is going to get you high marks for IELTS? Of course, the second. The first one, I exaggerated a little bit, but that was exactly a possible answer on the part of a candidate that does not really speak very good English. But the second answer was perfectly spoken, totally untrue, but still perfect English. That's all we care for at IELTS. We're not really interested in the truth. You can tell us that you fly at night over to the moon and back, and we will be happy with the answer. We're not going to question what you actually do at night. This is important to remember. Nobody is ever going to question whether what you say is true or completely invented. If it's a story, all tale, fine. Is it good English? Great. That's all we need. So let's proceed on with the presentation here. Sorry, I'll be sharing the screen very soon. And this is what I've been talking about. Yeah, no need for truth. So this is an example that I gave you from, again, from the examiner's booklet that was last year. One of the questions was, what do you like to do when you go to the countryside? And I remember asking this question to a couple of students who had been born, raised in the big city. They had never taken a single step outside of it. Imagine, well, it's difficult for you because, yeah, you're right. Okay, this is a good question. I'll stop for a second here. Is it true the speaking IELTS test must reveal, according to data, an actual fact? I mean, the writing test. No! Heavens, no! Nobody is checking your answers. If you tell me that oxygen combined with iron provides a medical solution for pneumonia, it's perfectly fine. I mean, we're not going to be cross-checking with references with the medical community. I can guarantee you that. Let me give you an example. Just think about it for a single second. How many exams do you think are taken on a single day, on a single week? Make up data or references is fine. Make up data or references. You mean part 1 or part 2? Let's be clear on this one here. Is data references part 1 or part 2? Writing part 1 or writing part 2? Anyway, we're talking about speaking. I should like to say this. But in part 2, I'm not really sure what data you can make up, because it's usually an opinion, an agreement, disagreement. But if in support of your ideas, you want to bring up data that is totally bogus, that is absolutely completely absurd, there is nothing in the band descriptors that accounts for the veracity of the data. So if you're telling me, we all know that people have 3 legs, so in order to walk faster, we should buy 3 pairs of shoes. I think this would be a good idea. There's nothing I can do as an examiner to just go ahead and say, no, this student has used bad English. But still good English. Again, we're not checking your data. Absolutely not. Nobody will be doing that. And I'll give you a small example, actually. It's a good question. It's an excellent question, but I'll give you a small example from speaking part 2. But Please allow me another minute because I want to finish part one. And then when we get to part two, I'll be talking about an example from my personal experience. And I talked to my boss, to my team leader about it. And they give me a straight answer. And they said, no, Chris, there's nothing you can do about it. No, you have to accept it. It's good English. That's all you need. So I hope this answers your questions, at least for now. So let's get this one here. This is an example from part one. And am I sharing the screen? Yes, I am. Question. What do you like to do when you go to the countryside? Like I said, a candidate has never been to the countryside. Yeah. Imagine yourselves. I mean, it's impossible because you're mostly Indonesians, I guess. So, but you never get out of Joga. You never get out of the ring road. You don't even go to Sleman. What do? You were born on it. And sometimes you're caught off guard. Off guard means you didn't expect a question you could not answer. So you just give an answer like this. Cannot here is not working. Yeah. I don't know. I go to the countryside. This is correct. Again, this is the truth. But the fact that the examiner has asked you a question you cannot answer means only that you will be hesitating, that you will be not showing your best language. Okay, it's just not it's not a good idea. You should say something more. And what I mean by no need for truth is that by no means should it be true. So, for example, you give an answer like this. Oh, well, quite a lot of things. I like to ride my motorbike through the rice paddies, by making the farmers very angry. Sometimes they even get so incensed, they even shake with me, brandishing their pitchforks, yelling profanities at me. It's pretty thrilling. But if it's a Saturday or a Sunday, I only go hunting crocodiles and kangaroos because those are party animals. You don't see them at the weekend. The examiner, what will they do? They know there are no kangaroos in Indonesia. They know that in all likelihood, you don't do these things. But they will be amused because you have satisfied the requirements of the question, which means, put simply, you answer the question. The answer is correct, or at least is in line with you are actually addressing the content of what the examiner has asked. What do you do on weekends? What do you like? Or sorry, when you go to the countryside. Could there be kangaroos in the countryside? Yes, there could. Could you be doing this? Yes, it's possible. It's highly unlikely. But I would be amused as an examiner. I would just smile at you and I'll move on to the next question. I will not even think of asking you why. Okay, because it's just a good answer. It's good English. And it's rich in vocabulary. It shows mastery of the language. That is all I'm looking for as an exam. I'm not looking for any truth. When I go to university and I ask my students about the capital of Malaysia, if I'm teaching geography, yes, I'll be willing to know that it is Kuala Lumpur. But here in the IELTS exam, you can tell me the capital of Malaysia is Rome. As far as I know, it's all good to me. As long as you tell it to me in English. And here comes part two. Part two is the individual long term. So in this part, as I explained in the previous video, you're supposed to talk for 2 minutes uninterrupted. And you are supposed to be delivering a speech on one of the topics that the examiner will give you. I give you a few examples in the first part. So here's a few tips about part two. Tip number one is notes. The examiner will hand you a piece of paper, a pen, and it will tell you you can make notes if you wish. So do that. By all means, do make notes. And how do you make notes? Here's a big point. So let's say that, for example, the topic is describe an experience, a meeting you had. That's a good one. Describe a meeting you had with one person that you remember. And you should say who this person was, when the meeting was, the occasion, and why you remember it. Okay. So I could tell you that when you make notes, use one word, maximum 2 words. Do not start writing sentences on that piece of paper. You get 60 seconds, guys. 60 seconds ain't no long time. So, yeah, you better treasure every second that you have there. So I'll give you an example. Describe a meeting that you had with a person that you remember because, okay, the person was, why do I remember the meeting? Yeah, it's not visible on the screen. Okay. Visual. It's me only, apparently. The slides. Must I cannot advance the slides. Doesn't matter. It's okay. I cannot write it on the board because it's not working apparently right now. So just for the keep the notes short. This is the basic point. When you write, organize the notes in a diagram, like write one word in the middle. For example, you write Jimmy in terms of the person that you met. And around Jimmy, you can write Christmas 92 or Eid al-Fitr for the occasion. Why do you remember? Jimmy, super cool singer. I don't know, whatever. Whatever reminds you, you need no more than 1 or 2 words maximum to remember. You don't need to write an essay. You need to make notes. Keep them short. 1 minute, and that's it. The examiner will tell you, okay, you may start. Apologies. Okay, you may start speaking now. That's it. When you have a diagram and notes before your eyes, you can go on for 2 minutes, but without the notes, it's impossible. Or it's impossible. It takes a lot more practice, and you may very well forget what what you wanted to talk about. So keep talking, talking. Don't stop. Because if you stop before the 40-minute marker, the examiner will just look at you for 5 straight seconds without saying a word. And then they will ask you, can you tell me anything more about it? We could be a bit like, yeah, you don't know what to say. Keep talking. It doesn't matter whether or not you're making a lot of sense, or rather, it doesn't matter how important it is what you're saying, even if you're just rambling on. This is a good time to do it. The examiner at some point will just tell you to stop. Now, to get back to the question that I received before, I'll give you an example of what happened once when I was back in China. A candidate came in and the topic was something along I give you a random topic and a random example, but the spirit is the same. Let's say the topic was, can you describe a time when you went out with some friends and you had a lot of fun, something like this. Candidate came in, picked up the card. I explained what he had to do, gave the instructions. Candidate started talking after 1 minute. He started talking about the latest model of a car that he bought. And I was like, what could I do? What could I do? Could I mark him down? If I look at the examiner booklet, I scanned it thoroughly. I looked at it inside out. I know exactly every single word that is in that booklet, and not a single one tells you what if the candidate does not talk about what you told him to talk. And this is a good point. Could you mark him down? The answer is no. Has he used English? Yes. Was it good English? Yes. What can you deduce marks from? There's only one aspect. It's called coherence and cohesion. There, you can actually mark him down, but it's only one of the 4 band descriptors, one of the 4 criteria, sorry, for marking the candidate down. So if you're asking someone, and if a candidate is asked to talk about the weather in Indonesia, and they talk about the financial markets in Japan, what can the examiner do? Absolutely nothing. He will have to smile, listen, and at the end, ask a follow-up question, still whatever they have. And with the follow-up question, they will definitely be able to deduce marks from the coherence aspect. But it will still be a reasonable endeavor. Apologies again. So what's the point here? Where do we take the marks off from? Well, the answer that my supervisor, my team leader at the time gave me was very easy. He said, Chris, don't worry. If they are the kind of people who want to learn something by heart, so they come to the exam, they repeat the memorized story, and they hope for good marks, you will cast them out in part 3. In part 3, there is no way they can do this, because in part 3, the examiner can take the liberty of asking questions at random, which are not scripted. But in part 2, if they want to memorize, let them do it. What can you do? You can only assess the English language. So keep talking. Keep talking. At some point, the examiner will tell you to stop. And that's it. You stop. Please don't go on. I need to cut it short because we're running out of time here. So the point is, like I said in part 1, if you just give a monosyllabic answer in part 1, the examiner will not have many materials to talk about to assess your language. But if there is another, the more words you speak, the better. That's the point. And you don't have to finish. It's not like TOEFL. You don't have to finish your speech. You can go on and be interrupted by the examiner and nothing will change. Absolutely nothing. Sometimes the examiner will just like, yeah, sorry. It's interesting, but 2 minutes are up. So the point of the truth that I brought up in the previous part stands for part 2 as well. Here, there is a caveat. There is a point that I would like to draw your attention to. If you have never experienced a situation as the one described in the task, you may not ask the examiner to change the topic card. Please do not do that. I can tell you, examiners are not allowed to change the topic card. There's no way we can do it. I mean, the situation in which an examiner might be willing to do it has to be extreme. And we don't want to contemplate it now. So let's say they will not do it. So what do you do? This is the point. There's a few things that you can do, in fact. And this must be brought up now because this is extremely important. So I'll give you two examples. Describe a public building you know about that you'd like to visit. You don't know any public buildings, or maybe, and I can tell you this, just like me, you don't really know what a public building is. What is a public building? A building for the public? Is a stadium a public building? Is a museum a public building? Yeah, maybe a museum it is. I don't know many museums. My mind is a little bit lost here. Like public building, yeah. Yeah, I can see what it could mean, but I'm not really sure. Or maybe you're just not interested in public buildings. You never go there. You only go to the cafe with your friends. Is the cafe a public building? You see, all of this could just hamper your performance. Could you think like, "Oh my God, what am I going to say now?" What you can do, you can describe a building in general, or you can describe a city that is full of buildings, or you could just, I don't know, describe a park, public park. The important thing to do in this case here is just tell the examiner. So the examiner will just not be willing to give you lower marks on coherence, as I explained before, like your ability to stay on topic, because you have told them, look, I'm not sure what a public, you told him, open quotes. Mr. Examiner, I'm not sure what a public building is, but I would like to talk about the museum in Georgia. Great. Go ahead and do it. Don't even ask. Do it. Talk about it. The examiner will only smile back at you and listen with extreme attention. And they will also be impressed in a positive way. They will think like, okay, good. He does not know, but he's still willing to speak. And he's telling me what he's going to do. It's all positive aspects. All. So another example is describe some advice you received about choosing a job or studying the subject to study. Again, maybe you don't remember any such advice. Like usually you make the decisions for yourself, or with such a long time ago, you'd have to think for hours just to come up with a reasonable answer. So what you do is you can just think about somebody else, or you can reverse the situation and think, I don't really ask for advice, but people always ask me for advice. And I remember this time when I gave advice. Awesome. Describe that time. Inform the examiner that you're going to do that. And do it. This is of maximum importance because sometimes in part two, it does happen that a topic comes up and you're a little bit at a loss about what to say, what to recall, what to mention. It's just a little bit foggy. But if you alter it a little bit, if you personalize the topic, it's fine. It doesn't have to stick to the rules verbatim. You can alter the rules in part two. You can adapt them, customize them. Let's put it this way. So yeah, for the last advice before we move on is download a few topics and practice. Practice, well, every one of you has got recording devices. I'm sure you can practice in front of the computer. You can just download a few. The topics are everywhere on the internet. I do not need to put you towards them. You can download, you can find them for yourself. Speaking part two topic. You can record yourself and listen to yourself and tell me, do you like to listen to yourself? That is one more advice. And the third, but last one is practice making up stories, like completely out of the blue. Come up with a random story and yeah, just try to see if you have good imagination, it's going to be perfectly fine. Now, all right. I think it's question and answer time now. And I'll stop sharing the screen. No, I'll start sharing the screen. Sorry, guys, this technology here is still escaping me. But you're very welcome to bring up any question. Okay. A few question here. Okay, well, so makeup mostly. I once took an IELTS test, and the person who gave it said so. And I'm glad to hear it. So I don't. It doesn't have to fit the data and the facts. Oh well, if any examiner has told you that the facts must be correct, they're sorely wrong. We're not masters of truth here. Absolutely, absolutely not. So by no means, refer that examiner to me, please go ahead and do it. That's totally bogus. Besides, who are we to ascertain what is true and what is not? Yes, we all agree that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. But I don't know. What about other facts? Who's ever going to question medical facts? Absolutely no one. I often wondered if my words or sentence were wrong every time I tried to speak English. How do I solve this? Oh, well, the advice stands. The one that I gave in the last one, record yourself, is possibly the best advice I can give you. Just be an actress. Record yourself and see how you sound. If you're really interested in knowing whether or not they're right, the only way to solve it is to just put them down on paper and get somebody else to examine them. So you need a native speaker or more simply a teacher. But if you, yeah, well, there's no other way to solve your doubts. You can also use Google Translate, but I would not recommend that. It could help on occasion, but it is not the solution. The best solution for knowing whether or not it's right or wrong is probably speaking to a native speaker. So they will tell you, yeah, somebody specifically in charge of telling you whether it's right or wrong. For how long can we prepare the speech for introduction for part 1? Part 2, you probably mean. As you said, keep talking, but no monologue. No, I didn't say keep talking. I said talk for 20 seconds. Part 1 is, yeah, no, if you're talking about part 1, you've got to be talking for, you've got to be answering questions. And what I did recommend is that your questions shouldn't be too short, but not that you should keep talking. No, please don't do that. Just stop at some point. And you conclude your answer, and that's it. In part 1, you are to receive an average 12 questions. As I said, you get 4 to 5 minutes, excluding the basic introductions and pleasantries in the beginning, like what's your name? Can I see some ID? You're left with a maximum of like, yeah. You've got to complete, the examiner is actually, I wouldn't say required, but instructed to ask you 3 frames of questions. So they must try to complete the 3rd frame. So out of respect for my ex-colleagues, I would recommend that you do not spend longer than 20 seconds for each question. So this, there's no speech for introduction, absolutely no speech for introduction. The first frame will be, after the first question will be, what is your name? Can I see some ID? In this first part, I'm going to ask you a few questions about yourself. Let's talk about where you live, or let's talk about, do you work or do you study? That's it. And if I ask you a question, I'm not, and I repeat this, I am not expecting you to ramble on for longer than 30 seconds maximum. I don't need to know the story of your life. I need to an answer. Where do you live? Oh, I live in Jakarta, which is a city in Indonesia, Central Java. Fine. Great. That's it. Okay. Are there any things you don't like to know about Georgia? Good. You can elaborate a little bit more, but please don't start a monologue in part 1 because it's not supposed to be the monologue. In part two, yes. In part one, no. For part two, can we talk more in point we feel familiar, but still answer the task card? Yes. Thank you. That's exactly what I recommended that you do. Just my recommendation is explain what you will be talking about. If it's not exactly what's on the card, you can say, and I'm going to be saying this, and I'm going to be saying that. But it's not really it's probably good. It's certainly good for the examiner to know what you're talking about or what you will be talking about. But if you're more or less on topic with a card, trying to take liberties, you can talk about something else as well. It's actually pretty good because maybe you can talk more competently or more fluently about something else. Then you get the chance to show off your language. So that's always good. Don't worry, as I said it, and I said again, I will say again, do not worry about sticking to the rules given to you by the card. So if you take a few liberties and they are good for your language expression, IELTS, British Council encourages that. I was instructed to give these advice to my examinees. If they would ask, what do I do now? Tell your examinees that you can do this, you can do that. So we want you to speak English. The more you do it, the better. The happier we all are. And at the end, if you've had a good conversation with the examiner will also be very happy. And if you make him smile with some tall tales about what you've done, and it doesn't matter. But it's still much better than you showing that you don't know what to say, and the examiner will feel sorry for you. Better to make him feel amused. It's always a better feeling. And I can tell you from experience, because at the end of the exam, I will make a choice. And the choice will be this band, this band. And sometimes you're just in the middle. Not sure. Yeah, a little bit, but on the other hand, it did this, but there was, is it very much or just enough? There's so many descriptors in those bands that sometimes examiners have to think hard. I mean, in the end, the decision would be governed by the feeling. In the end, all decisions are governed by feeling. I'll get too philosophical here, but hey, you give me a good feeling, yeah, come on. I'll give you a bad one. Who's gonna question that? Half a band? Nobody. So I hope I have answered your questions, and because we have come to the conclusion, I think my colleague is telling me to cut it short. So guys, I'll be talking to you again, and there's going to be another one of these presentations about part three. And I'm going to be I'm going to be explaining part three, which is where you can tell the boys from the men, as we say in English. But yeah, the part three is the real deal. Part one and two, yeah, it shows your English. Part three, it fine tunes my assessment of your English. It means I can really, really know how good you are. So we'll be talking about it in the next episode. For now, thanks for your questions. Excellent questions, all of you. Thank you very much for asking. And yeah, what should I do, Mas? How should I conclude this? Should I stop everything or will you do that? Goodbye, everybody. Have a good day.